Time for Thinking Real Estate. Laura and Jackie in the house today. Oh, that just kind of ended.
Did it?
Yeah.
You must not have it queued in all the way then. Huh?
Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay.
So far, so good?
So far,
So far. Beautiful day today.
it looks nice.
Ready for the big Promise Bowl?
Yeah.
We'll be
Your
there.
only live coverage is right here
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
on
Who would
WKHM.
need anybody other than you?
I can't imagine it.
I know.
Take your radio to the game.
Is that because there are going to be so many people you're not going to be able to see the game?
There were a lot of people
Whatever.
last year. I think it was.
There were a lot.
I think it's a cool idea. It's a lot of hype. It's the only football game I go to,
Is it?
Mhm.
Okay.
unless I get the urge to go to another one. But that doesn't
That
happen.
doesn't
like,
happen ever.
well, hasn't happened yet. But I'm not ruling it out.
Should be a very big crowd, but not that. I mean, there'll be seats for you. Okay. All right.
They can go. Don't they have hospitality tents and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's not seats in the stadium, you can
Get in a tent.
get in a tent.
That's like I said. Take your radio.
Well, yeah. Last year, I think we stood by the fence most of the time. I don't like to sit because then you can't really talk to people. And I don't really go to watch the football game.
No.
I go for the socialization.
Yeah.
See who I know.
What do they call that? Networking.
Is that what they call that?
I think so.
I just thought that was my personality. I don't have the patience. I've never really been a.
Wow. Is that your purse?
No, this is my.
Oh.
And if anybody wants to see it, they
Because
can go to
that
our
is-
website.
Yes.
thinkingrealestate.com.
That's the orangest thing I've ever seen in my life.
That's my briefcase. I
Wow.
brought my computer in today.
Now you cannot miss that.
And you know what? Orange, every time I see someone with orange on, I say thanks for wearing my color. But orange is the color to wear today because it's support your local your food shelter.
Oh, today?
Yeah.
Who knew?
Who knew? I didn't know until I was watching the Today Show.
Learn something every day here.
So, what do you want to talk about? People should call in with questions.
Sure.
Bill's
On assignment.
he's on assignment on a golf course.
Oh, well,
He's teeing off at 10:04. And I can't remember here on Breeze golf course. Up
Where's-
in
where's
it's
that?
just north of Augrey.
oh wow, that's a long commute. Are you
Well,
taking calls?
I am.
Good morning.
Good morning. I have a question about, I'm thinking about selling my house, and it needs a new roof, and I was wondering how the resale value is on the metal roof.
Oh, that's a very interesting question
Good
because
question.
I was thinking about those metal roofs just yesterday. I wondered if they lasted longer. That'd be a good question for Tyler Construction. Don't they have a radio show here on Saturdays?
Saturday. Yeah.
I think I love the look of the metal roof, and there aren't enough out there for me to answer your question, whether or not it's adds value to the resale or not. The only ever question I've ever
I don't see a lot done on residential.
not in like a subdivision or in the city. I have
Right.
there is one out on Kibbe Road. I noticed there's as you're driving back into town from here, there's a metal roof on a house that's on the west side of the road, northwest side of the road, whatever direction that is.
So you're thinking of putting a new roof on?
Yes,
Gosh, I don't know. It's a good question. Just what do you put a new roof on, or do you sell a house with the
With
bad roof?
Right.
That's just in and of itself a good question, and then you're adding dimension when you put the metal into it. So let me just go because I can't answer the metal part, but I think they're cool. I sold.
Is it worth it to put the new roof on?
Well, I sold a house just recently, and that needed a new roof. It clearly needs a new roof. The value of the appraisal came in, I think, it came in right around where I told her she paid $100,000 for the house, and the appraisal came in at 102. She bought it needing the roof, but the appraisal was as if the roof had 2 or 3 more years left in it. So usually sellers don't want to pay the $8,000 that it may cost for the roof because they don't usually have that. But I would say do it because you'll probably get.
It also it opens up different financial opportunities for the buyers
Right.
because if they're getting an FHA loan or any government-backed loan and the roof needs to be replaced, that's going to limit whether they can actually buy that house or not.
Right. So I would say replace the roof and your value will be sustained more easily. If it's anything, if it's bad carpet, people deduct automatically for that stuff.
Yeah, you could call, Billy White would help you out, but if you're listening Saturday, you could call the Tylers, would certainly answer that. They'd be
Question.
happy to answer that
Yeah, I
question.
would love to know. I would love to hear that answer.
Thank
I
you.
think that's a good one.
Okay, that's what I'll do.
Okay,
Thank you.
we'll follow up on that. Are you taking calls?
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning, Greg. It's Laura Mobley.
Laura Mobley, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, Laura.
Laura, how are ya?
Good.
You're,
I have a question for Laura.
okay,
So I have my house was for sale, as Laura knows, and I had someone approach me, and they are currently renting it for 6 months, with the possibility that they're thinking about buying it.
Buying it.
You, their lease is up in December.
Mm-hmm.
Can you put their house back on the market with someone in it, renting like that, or do you have to wait until they actually tell you they are going to buy it or not going to buy
that's
it?
a good question.
Did you do the documentation that gave them a lease with an option to buy? Or is this just verbal?
No, it's just a straight lease. No, it's an actual lease. We did give them a physical lease, but not with an option.
Okay.
That came about after they were living in the house and said, "Oh, we love it here." But I've had other people approach me in the interim, that had looked at it before, and as the housing markets are picking up,
Right,
they're coming back to me and saying, "Hey, is that house up for sale?"
right.
And so I'm kind of stuck now.
Yeah, you could put it on the market, even if you put it on the market, what are we in September? Even if you put it on the market and their lease is up in December, your timing probably would be perfect. Because by the time someone got it marketed and you got the offer, you're looking at probably getting an offer maybe October, and then they got to go through the financing, which is 30 to 45 days. And then you could just give them 30-day notice or 30-day possession. So that puts you right about the end of December, if my math is correct.
Right.
Right.
And then that would maybe, if they are interested, push them to kind of make that commitment one way or another.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep. You could, that's what I would do. Now,
There's nothing within like leasing that prohibits me from doing that.
no, your lease probably it may even address putting it on the market. I don't know. You're going to have to work out getting access to the house for showings, and I will say sometimes tenants are cooperative and sometimes they aren't. If the people are interested in the house, that may be a
Yeah, they're-
50-50 chance. They may be not cooperative simply so they could buy it, or they could be cooperative so that they know that, or you know that they're very, very nice people.
They are very nice people. But now this leads to another question, and you may or may not be the one to ask maybe a mortgage company, but with if they do mention the lease with the option, how does that work? Just at the end of their lease, they have the option to buy the house, and does any of the money that they have down go towards that, or how does that work?
Usually that's all spelled out when the lease is started. So
it's
they're at a
something
lease.
new.
Yeah, because usually you would maybe up the lease a little bit and some of the money would go towards the price of the house.
Gotcha. Well, thank you.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
Hey, I'll talk to you Monday.
You'll have a good Monday.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. You taking a call?
Yeah.
Good morning.
Oh, they're rolling in today.
Yeah, I wanted to ask her.
Yeah.
The asphalt, does that add the value to a home along with landscaping around the home for the deal in our front yard, and we put landscaping on there, and we did it in tiers going up. And then she had a concrete driveway, and we put asphalt over top of it. And the city, according to the bank there, must like it up to mortgage higher on that property.
Well, asphalt or concrete would give more value than a dirt driveway. But asphalt versus concrete should be about the same. It's just, unless the concrete's in bad condition.
Concrete is, when it gets hot, it shatters. You can see that on the highway often. Asphalt gives and takes with the weather.
Yeah, and that may be true, but the typical...
I use some asphalt.
The typical purchaser doesn't know the difference. They just want something, for example, my husband would never buy a house on a dirt road because he doesn't want to have to wash his car all the time, and he's very meticulous about his cars.
Yeah.
And he's not that is not an unusual scenario. Your house gets dirtier on a dirt drive with a dirt driveway or with a dirt road in front of it.
Right.
So even with
I live on the country on Dalton Road, and it's back in the sticks, and it's a gravel road there, but we go back up maybe to a mile back into the woods to get to it.
But-
Nice long driveway, but we got crushed concrete and asphalt, ground up asphalt on our driveway, and one driveway's just paved, and that's all we got back there.
I believe an appraiser
So we got done.
would give value for a hard driveway versus a dirt driveway or
Sure.
a finished driveway.
But
and landscape,
not much difference between,
Not much, although it becomes, what the big difference is, the house becomes, if they're deciding between your house with a finished driveway and nice landscaping versus the house next door that has a dirt driveway and is
Right.
barren landscaping, they're gonna go for yours. So it adds to the appeal and makes it sell faster. So not necessarily, so that actually adds to the value.
A lot of concrete and
okay, thanks for the call. 787-3397, if you have a question.
I'm impressed those people all knew the number, because we hadn't mentioned it yet. Although you probably say it all morning long, starting at, what time do you start?
Early,
Early,
before you're up.
before I'm up. Couple things that have happened. What did you mention to me, Jackie?
Appraisal
Oh,
came in.
appraisal came in low on a nice house. Although it came in, the house was listed for 162.9.
Now, what house are we talking about?
One that I have
Okay, on the market?
on the market. Got
Okay.
an offer on it for 165, asking the seller to pay 3% in closing costs. And people need to remember, when you make an offer on a property and you want the seller to pay some of your closing costs, you need to calculate out the price you're offering and then subtract the amount that you're asking the seller to pay, because that's the number that you're actually offering to the seller. So for example, if it's $100,000 and you're asking them to pay 3% in closing costs, you're really only offering the seller $97,000. And I think buyers forget that.
Really? That's pretty simple.
It is. But the so the house was listed for 62.9,
162.9.
162.9, sorry. Offer at 165 with 3% in seller's concessions. I can't remember. I guess that's about a little less than $5,000. So not 160. Appraisal came in at 162. So,
That's not an issue, is it?
well, it is because the seller was relying on the bottom line. You know, we do a net sheet, and on the net sheet we say, here's the sale price and all the expenses, what you're going to have to pay at the closing table, which includes those seller's concessions.
What are seller concessions?
Seller's concessions are when the seller pays for some of the buyer's closing costs.
Well, give me,
Could be prepaids, it could be loan origination fees, escrows, anything that the bank wants you to pay for, surveys, appraisal. And so they're asking the seller to pay 3% of those costs. Those costs, I think, tend to be between 4 and 5%. And so typically the bank will allow a seller to pay 3% of that amount.
so your appraisal was what? Just a couple thousand below the
3,000 below the asking.
The bid?
The offer, yep.
Okay.
So now we have to determine what's
Where-
gonna happen.
Where that 3,000 is coming from.
Yeah, so either the buyer has to bring an additional 3,000 to the table, or the seller has to take 162, but if the seller takes 162, do we adjust somewhere else? Do we negotiate with the buyer somewhere else, which is what we're doing?
Now, did the buyer qualify for more?
It's
Does that
irrelevant.
make, does it make a difference?
That's irrelevant because the house is worth what the house is worth. The other thing is this was an FHA mortgage, so that FHA appraisal is going to stay with that house. At least it used to for 6 months. I assume that I haven't heard that rule.
So if the buyer
has
qualified for
changed. 165.
200,000,
Right.
that would, they'd still have to come up with 3,000 cash?
Yes,
Or
because the
get
bank won't lend for anything more than the appraisal.
Correct. Jackie followed you and I lost you there for a second.
Well, you know what I mean.
It was at 200,000 that threw me out there.
Well, couldn't they ask the seller to pay that?
Well, what they have asked is that the seller take 162.
Oh, yeah, well, sure.
And the seller has come back and said, well, I'll take the 162, but I'm only going to pay 1.5% of your closing costs.
Well, it's apples and oranges, isn't it?
Well, no, the offer came in at 165 with 3% in closing costs.
Okay.
So that's 5,000. I'm rounding, but that's about 5,000. So that's a net of 160 to the seller. So if you take 162 and he now still has to pay 3%, now it's a couple thousand, I don't know.
$4,500.
4,500 off of 162, which gives them a net of, you gotta do the math here, 157.5. See
So the
the
seller's
difference? $2,500 difference
That's
net to the seller for a $5,000 or for a $3,000 difference in the appraisal price versus the offer price. You look confused.
Well, it's,
So then, but it's my job to make
It's
the recommendation.
frustrating.
Well, and that's why having a net sheet showing the seller
Yeah.
what their bottom line is makes it a heck of a lot easier. But that's, and the house was listed, you gotta remember the house was listed for 162.9, so the offer came in above. And unless there's a bidding war, I wasn't surprised that the appraisal came in at 162.
that's pretty close.
It is close, but there's still a $3,000 difference that has to be made up somewhere. Somebody's gotta eat that to make the deal come together. So I'm sure we'll pull it together. This just happened.
No, that must happen all the time. Maybe
You know,
not that.
it happens.
Maybe not that close.
No, it does happen, and it's going to happen as our market gets better because appraisals are always lagging, and unless you have cash sales that justify the higher prices, you're always you may be fighting appraisals more often. And we do see a lot of cash sales.
Yeah, there have been a lot of cash sales. I mean, just in our sales this year, about 50% of them have been cash. So that's a good thing for the market.
Wow.
Cash is king. Can't argue with cash.
Yeah. Cash is good.
Yeah. Another one that we had was a home in the city where,
Or are you taking calls?
Sure.
Good morning.
Hi, I missed the beginning of the show, but I have a question about the appraisal. Is the appraisal kind of like the benchmark for, say the appraisal came in at $100,000, is that what you in the real estate business and use to list the house going on that appraisal, or can you just totally come up with a different number?
well, it depends on if it's an FHA appraisal, and I'd have to say 90% of the loans written today are FHA loans, then the seller's going to have to take 162. So as a realtor, and
Well,
160,
she just said the appraisal is 100,000.
right. Well, she uses that as an example. So
Yeah.
So, as a realtor, I would probably have a candid conversation with my seller and we would discuss the options, but more than likely, we might list it a little bit higher, but because a conventional mortgage could have a different they could use a different appraisal.
Well, and appraisals aren't done until a purchase agreement is in place usually, so that's where it comes to negotiating between the buyer and the seller. As far as coming up with a price for listing, realtors do that based on market analysis.
Yeah, we
and-
have a range. And usually my range, because I have an appraisal background, is usually right in there.
You're close.
Right.
Okay.
And in this market, I'll tend to go to the top of the range simply because who knows? I mean, we just don't have enough property to sell.
So if they were asking 165 and the appraisal came in at 148, you got problems?
That's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's an issue.
And especially if it's an FHA. And I always tell, this particular house, meticulous, absolutely meticulous. So, and then every appraiser does things different. I think that particular appraiser was out of Adrian. I prefer Jackson appraisers, and we actually write that into our purchase agreements. So, I just think your local appraisers know your market a lot better than anyone coming from a different area.
You know we're out of time.
I'm sad. We were just rolling. Let's roll into Mark's. He won't mind. Oh,
So
he
if-
gets picky about that.
If you need a house or if you have a house, call Laura.
Yep, 780-3800, or go to our website, thinkingrealestate.com.
Are you or your parents moving into an assisted living community? Let two men in a truck help. Most people
listeners,
underestimate the amount of work of the move
Sorry.
when they do it
Oh my
themselves.
God.